Alrighty, my name is Miles Gletzner. I'm the executive director of Inhora, which is the only pro-life at the end of life ministry in New Mexico. Um, Wonderful works are being done at the beginning of life, and I can't praise that enough. And for some reason, things at the end of life haven't been as prevalent, and this is maybe a national or even an international situation that has kind of been overlooked in our purview. So let's talk about death. I've chosen a number of art pieces, food for thought, and I really believe that beauty is a way to open up our hearts and help us to experience and contemplate these things. Mary is the whole inspiration for this mission. We know that her heart was pierced throughout her life, and especially at the foot of the cross. So our mission is to really partner with Mary in serving those in their last hours, because that's a very, very key time and a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that's being robbed from people through dehumanization, institutionalization, putting people into nursing homes, and abandoning them in ERs, and even people dying on the streets. So Mary says that when we care for someone in their last days, we are caring for the Lord. And he is experiencing another passion in each of these suffering and dying people. So it's really important that we care for them and join her in this. This is from Death with Dignity. You all probably know there's two main organizations promoting euthanasia, medical aid in dying in the US, Death with Dignity, and then Compassion and Choices. Unfortunately, they have it all wrong. Compassion is not killing. It never has been and it never can be. One quote that I read recently is, whenever we find that killing is a solution for one thing, we'll find that it becomes a solution for other things. So ending somebody's life, supporting them in all of the forms of euthanasia, I'll talk about that here in a moment, is a very grave evil, and it leads to more and more evils. So pro-life at the end of life, these are all different terms used to describe euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide. They're starting to change the terminology physician-assisted death, and making it even more positive sounding. But long story short, it's encouraging suicide, which we know is contrary to the faith and contrary to human dignity, and is causing all sorts of problems. One thing to note is medical aid in dying is not legal in many states right now, but voluntary stopping eating and drinking is legal, because who can stop somebody from not eating and drinking except for the person who's choosing not to do it? So death doulas and these anti-life organizations in any state are partnering with people and promoting this way of dying anywhere, because it's an accessible way for somebody to commit suicide. So it's very dangerous. Now in New Mexico, we are one of the most prolific and most lenient when it comes to medical aid in dying laws. And that was passed within the last 4 years. So it is legal in New Mexico. Isn't surprising. I did use AI for this. It's the only one I did use AI for, but I thought it was pretty fitting. And I wish I could pull up this quote, and actually I will end the presentation briefly so I can read it in full, or that you all can actually read it too, because it's pretty powerful. Our society, we know, both in pro-life at the beginning of life and at end of life, the proponents of those pushing for killing look at autonomy as being everything. It's my choice, my body, I can die the way I want to. And in death doula programs, they're promoting this tremendously, basically saying to death doulas, to nurses, to the medical field, put all your personal beliefs and ideas behind, and whatever they tell you, do. If they want to end their life, promote it and support it. It's their life. They get to do what they want. You're not able to bring in your beliefs, your ideas. Everything is true, right? We know that that's a huge problem in society, but a lot of it stems with autonomy isn't everything. So this quote, autonomy grew up as a street fighter and was bloodied in some genuinely noble battles against medical paternalism. But like so many rulers with this sort of pedigree, it has quickly forgotten its democratic roots and has grown fat and brutal in power. So if we see the one law of autonomy has become the law of the land, the law of healthcare. I get to do what I want and nobody can tell me otherwise. Any thoughts, or has anybody kind of experienced this in your practice, or? And no worries if not.
Just a comment, is that autonomy, isn't that another form of pride?
When we know better,
Yeah,
we know better than God. We make our own laws. We become God. It's the same problem with Adam and Eve in the garden in a way. Yeah, absolutely.
And self-reliance is, I read a little bit about this, it sounds good, but then I'm not sure who said this, it's actually self-love. You know, when you look at St. Therese, you don't want to do self-love.
Interesting. Yeah, well said. And just based off of these few comments, we can see how diabolical this is. And ultimately, it is the devil, the evil one, who's behind this movement in our culture. So while there is good things, and we know free choice is important to us, once it gets this little twist on it, in this independence or self-love, then that's when it goes astray. And that's really how it is with a lot of God's truths, is just a little twisting, right? Satan has a little bit of truth in there and then changes the whole thing and makes it evil, right? Because Satan doesn't have any, he's not a creator, he's more of just a disruptor and a twister. So same thing at the beginning of life as it is in the end of life too. It's my choice. I get to do what I want. So what is choice? Are the people who are considering euthanasia or the medical providers, are they really making a free choice? So these questions, these situations really point out that actually a lot of people in this situation who are considering euthanasia are probably, and actually almost always, under different influences. And we can even say that for ourselves when we're making choices. It's usually not just us. It's sometimes the spouse we have, and sometimes the neighbors, the priest. So it's a lot of things that are going into it. But all the more with a choice like this, because to kill ourselves, to commit suicide, is so contrary to nature. How could we be in a right state of mind to be able to make that decision? And this is really important because right now I feel like our culture is going through a very dangerous shift regarding mental health care. The door with euthanasia is becoming so dangerous and big that no longer is society going to be able to say that suicide is preventable and that these mental diseases should be helped. Now euthanasia is opening up this type of slippery slope where they're describing certain things like some types of depression as terminal depression, which are now eligible for hospice. So now, instead of providing treatment and care for people in behavioral health vulnerable states, they're now being pushed and offered medical aid in dying. So a couple points here. Killing is the ultimate violation of autonomy, of course, because we can't choose once that choice is made. It's the killing of choice. It's the killing of our volition. It's the ending of it. So is that really a free will choice? Another thing, a lot of the people who are asking for euthanasia are people who are suffering, whether it's internally through a mental illness or through pain. So could it be that actually the pressure and the reason they want to die is because their treatable symptoms aren't being treated well? And then here we are for somebody with depression, we're saying, treatments aren't working. Okay, suicide is okay now. You can kill yourself now. End of treatment, hey, and we don't have to pay. It's easier than doing the type of research that we need in order to improve mental health treatment. Let's just kill. So again, looking at the individual who's considering it, it's really interesting to think, is it more a pressure that they're feeling by not having their needs met? And then due to inadequate education, we know similar to abortion, they say, yes, we're telling you options, but really they're presenting a option primarily in the secular world. And the same thing is happening in medical aid in dying. Sometimes all people just need to hear is, have you considered medical aid in dying? And then the conversation starts. And of course, the sweet words, oh, it's merciful, you won't suffer, you won't feel it, your family will be okay, they don't even have to know. And now with homes like we're starting in Inhora, you don't even have to die at home. You can go to one of these homes and you can die there, or we can get you a hotel in another state where it's legal. So similar for the abortion thing, people are coming to states like ours and getting treatment to end their lives that way. But a lot of this can be helped with education. What are the other pain treatment options? What are the other mental health treatment options? But instead, those things aren't always being presented. So is that a real choice? Are these people really making a free choice to end their life? And that is doubtable. And I already talked about some of these. I will talk about fear and distress, though. If somebody's already afraid of dying, and I think most of our society is because we don't have much faith and we don't have much sense for the afterlife and we have a nihilism. So if they're already afraid of dying, then what a great ticket and opportunity, especially not believing in God, to just end it peaceably in the way that I want. I don't have to fear because I know what's going to happen. It's on my terms. I get to choose when it happens, where it happens, and it'll be well supported. My hospice team will be there. By the way, our tax dollars do support euthanasia. It's covered through hospice, the medications to end our life. So somebody who's afraid of dying, all they probably need is a straight, honest conversation about dying, and they don't need to be killed, right? And then sometimes family or friends, we see it in social media. It's being normalized, it's compassionate, it's good. So they're getting this type of pressure and this type of misleading as well. My life, my death, my choice. You know, these signs are right in line with what we see in the abortion movement as well. So there are other reasons to oppose it. The United States Catholic Conference of Bishops. This first one is just so powerful, right? Our healthcare system is driven so much by the numbers. We know that it's sad and it's not good, but how much more concerning is it if we're putting that power into a money-hungry organization? The money makers in the pharmaceuticals who are prescribing these medications to kill people, they're benefiting greatly. The hospitals now have an open bed that wasn't available because the sick person they were treating isn't there anymore. They killed them, so it opens it up for somebody else. So you see how it can become profitable, and how dangerous is that? We see what happens when this type of power is put into a few people's hands. And we know corporations are not person-centered and definitely don't have Catholic values. Puts vulnerable persons at risk, especially going back to the education idea. If somebody's educated and if somebody knows their options and knows that the pain treatments that have been tried aren't the only options, then they can seek new treatments. But for somebody who's just receiving what the doctor tells them without investigating, without wondering, and if that doctor is already somebody who's promoting MAiD, then that's a very dangerous combination that happens to people who are not educated, who aren't as educated, right? So it becomes dangerous for minority groups and those who don't have higher college education. Not to mention, let's say my grandpa has a lot of money and I'm on his will, and I'm in a financial situation and I would get money from him if he died and I need it now. You see how evil and how that could turn into a situation where you start pressuring grandpa to consider medical aid in dying for selfish advantages. So coercion, abuse of the elderly, abuse of those at risk is very serious. And then I already mentioned the broad definition of terminal illness, including how there's now terminal depression. And that right there is just very, very concerning. Pain, not the primary issue. People think dying is always going to be painful, and it's only exacerbated when somebody's anxious about the experience too. It makes it seem like it's going to be unbearable if they're already having a painful situation that's not being treated. But they're really finding that for a lot of these people who are choosing to end their life, it's not even the main issue anyways. Pain can be managed. I know a lot of you prescribers already know that. This is really scary that no psychiatric evaluation or treatment is required. And I mentioned how it was only recently that New Mexico legalized euthanasia. That's actually worse for our state compared to those that did it first, because they learned what the first groups did wrong and got the wording to make it even easier for people to end their lives. So those in Compassion and Choices, they improve the legislature to make it easier for people to kill themselves. Threatens improvement to palliative care, rather than people thinking, I'm going to face this, I'm going to go through it, I know there's a supportive team. Now it becomes focused on how am I going to end my life. So palliative care is tremendous, huge, amazing, amazing program and team of people, multidisciplinary. And with things like euthanasia, it just cuts that out. It's not about palliation, it's just about killing. And it fosters discrimination. I already talked about that on the previous slide. Euthanasia robs us of life. And this is in so many ways. But if we think of euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide, as a type of abortion, the person who is being aborted doesn't have hope for repentance at that point. They've already committed suicide. Now, of course, we don't know what happens in those moments after they take the medication, and we should be praying, for repentance and for salvation at that point. But it's a choice that you can't go backwards on, you can't repent of, where, let's say parents, those that are participating in abortion, baby goes to heaven, and then the parents have time to repent. And God willing, they do, and then to get healing treatment. But somebody who ends their life, they don't have that opportunity. God is the God of life. He conquered death. I love this icon. So I'm Byzantine Catholic as well. We have a hymn that we sing. Yeah, we have some Byzantines here too. By death, he trampled death. So death is destroyed. God is the God of life, not the God of death. Euthanasia is exactly contrary to that. There's a story I'll fit in here, and this is not a quote by any means, but there was a man in a book that she wrote called Mindful About the End of Life. I've got a appendix to a citation at the end. So there's a man who was diagnosed with ALS, and that's a condition that progresses sometimes fairly speedily and unexpectedly. He wanted to end his life. He was an independent man who didn't want to depend on anyone. Sorry, guys, for keeping out of the screen so much. So he didn't want anybody to care for him. He felt he just couldn't handle that embarrassment and shame. So he decided he was going to drive off of a cliff and end his life. And he talked to his hospice team and he made the plans. And then it so happened his condition advanced and he couldn't drive anymore. So then he thought, okay, that didn't work. I'm going to shoot myself. So he talks to his team and he makes plans and he gets the gun. And before it happens, similar thing. He couldn't use his fingers anymore. So that plan B didn't work. He couldn't end his life. So he's continuing to live. Now there's an option of taking a medication. So he's thinking, okay, I've talked to my team, and this was in a time when it wasn't legal to have euthanasia, but he had enough of a certain medication that he could take, and he knew it would end his life. So he said, I'm going to do that. Condition progresses, and he can't swallow anymore. But as he's going through each of these stages, after this last one, he talks to the team and he says, I realize now that you were not trying to kill me. You weren't trying to end my life. You are teaching me how to live my life. And the last days of my life were the best days of my life. So thank you for being with me and supporting me. And please tell anybody else my stories so that they cannot end the best days of their life. Mm-hmm. And this woman, she doesn't have a religious background that I know of, and she's fairly known within the death and dying community. But what a powerful story. This is from a chapter in her book. So the dying don't need to be killed. And the dying don't need to be institutionalized either. They don't need to be cut away from society as unimportant and invaluable. That's actually one of the biggest fears I think that people have. And I would say another diabolical feature of our society, which is putting death behind doors, behind closed doors, and keeping the suffering out of view, out of sight, out of mind. When that happens, a number of things occur. One is we get to fantasize about what death is, or we can just totally ignore it. All of those things are happening in our society. But another problem that happens is those that are being isolated are coming to despair. And that is one of the most dangerous of temptations and sins, is to fall into despair and hopelessness, that there's a meaning to life, that their life has value. So here they are alone in a hospital where the medical system is not designed to take care of the dying. It's meant to take care of those who are living and to fix problems so they can keep living. So, but here dying people are in a system that wasn't made and designed to support them anyway. And then despair comes, whether or not they commit suicide or if they just die in that isolated state, including nursing homes. Then again, we have that chance for the evil one to rob people of life and the opportunity for life. So what is it people really need? Well, they need more Marys. They need more of the disciples who are willing to stay with them through their passion, Any questions and thoughts right now? And feel free throughout to interrupt, including those who are watching.
No, I think it's very powerful about kind of what you're saying as far as we keep things behind closed doors and it becomes this mystery. And as someone that's been there for like family members and seeing that process, it's different for everybody, but that can be an incredibly healing process for those present outside of the person that's suffering and dying. And so it's something that I think a lot of people don't think of with that.
Yeah, that's huge. It actually reminds me of someone I was talking with just yesterday. People have an idea of what hospice is, and then what it actually is different. So we were discussing how 24/7 caregiving is not included in hospice. It actually requires a lot of money to be able to support somebody around the clock, and it's not included with Medicare and Medicaid. So people who go into it end up getting this surprise that, oh wait, I don't really have the support. It's not even safe for me to try to die at home. And unfortunately, what happens is actually put strain on hospice providers. It puts strain on the nurses too, and leads to burnout because they're now stuck because they can't give the care that they know this person needs in their home too. So we have these horrible situations and traps. And again, it's the poor, it's the marginalized, disenfranchised who are suffering the most in these situations because they aren't able to afford a good death, which is horrible to say, but that's exactly what our society requires, is to have a good death. I mean, of course, unless our faith is very strong and such, but to have the death that we kind of dream or imagine that we see on TV, or maybe that we've read in the lives of the saints and such, isn't very feasible, sadly, unless you have a lot of money. There's a lot of art about death in the MAiD. Worth pondering and reflecting on. But yeah, what people need is presence. What they need is compassionate presence. This is amazing. Mother Teresa was, in this quote, referring to those who are living in the slums, those that are on their deathbeds. They are giving us an opportunity to be with Jesus 24/7. Jesus is present to us in two ways. He's present to us in the Eucharist, and he's present to us in the suffering. So how amazing is it that we can be with the suffering, that we can be with the dying? When we're with them in their passion, we are physically, actually, mystically present with God in his passion that's being kind of relived and experienced. Now it's redeemed after the cross. And yeah, we get to care for the dying. In doing so, we're caring and touching God. That is just awesome, awesome, awesome. This is a major teaching of Mother Teresa. It was a teaching of the Lord, who said, whatever you do to the least of these, you do to me. That's not just a nice phrase. It's actually real. So the fact that we can comfort him and follow Mary and stand at the cross in these moments with the dying is truly awesome. So I've got a major devotion to Mary. The very logo comes from the tilma of Our Lady of Guadalupe. The name Inhora comes from the rosary as it's recited in Latin, Nunc et in hora mortis nostrae, so in the hour or at the hour of death. So our vision is that there would be a home for every person at the hour of death. And with it, to counter and to resist, as the only pro-life at the end of life movement, the strong force of the culture of death for the elderly, the vulnerable, and institutionalized, or even those on the streets. So what is Inhora, and why is it a solution to these things that we're talking about? Well, the hospice model it's an interesting history, but we'll just jump to what it is now, which is it's part of the medical system. But one of the expectations is that the people in hospice have enough family support to be able to stay in their home. But we know that's not a reality, especially with the baby boomer generation, not as many kids or broken families where the kids just don't talk to the parents, even if they are there. Not to mention that we don't live as a community anymore. We don't live as a village, as connected people, even in our parishes. I'm sure this is sad for priests, is you see them Sunday and you never see them until next Sunday, or maybe you don't see them for a month or longer. And because of this disconnect that we know is so present, the hospice model doesn't really work unless there's the bridge between the medical system and the community. So that's what Inhora is. We're in the middle. We are not part of the medical system. We aren't we're not funded by Medicaid. We're not funded by Medicare. We're funded just through individual donors and such. We're community powered. So we're meeting a need of the medical system that they never wanted to meet in the first place, which is caring for the dying. That's always been the job of the people, of the community. It was never the job of the medical business, of the medical organization. So hospitals want us, hospices want us, because we're doing what they can't do and what they weren't designed to do. And the community wants us, as I know through the calls I've been getting from people, including a 24-year-old young lady who's dying right now and needed a home, or the spouse of a woman on the reservation who's also dying. So the community wants us. They know that they can't provide the care that they want. And if we just think about it, who is in the general population able to leave their jobs and provide 24/7 care to their loved one? Yes, some middle class or upper middle class wealthy people, but most of the population wouldn't be able to, because most of us are living paycheck to paycheck, or most of us don't have the type of savings even 3 months ahead of time. But when it comes to end of life, it's even harder to know how long it might last. So again, the community wants us, medical system wants us, and that's why there's more and more of these homes. But it's just so amazing that Inhora is happening in New Mexico, as the culture of death is so strong here, that we get to be the first in the biggest city in the state and in downtown Albuquerque, of all places. It's really a powerful, powerful opportunity that we have to kind of beat the opponent to the punch in a way, because I know from the death doulas and others I've spoken to in Compassionate Choices, they've called me a number of times, the local groups, Death with Dignity, wanting to know, are you going to do euthanasia? One of them actually gave a donation after the call. And I told them clearly we weren't, but that was really a gesture. But it's just so amazing and impressive that while other people have thought of it and wanted to do it, they didn't. And here we are slipping in under the radar in the darkness, kind of like Frodo. And I'm praying and believing that we get to establish these homes before the ones that are promoting euthanasia and these other immoral practices. So it's really exciting and awesome to be a part of, and to be only weeks away from having our first guest finally. This is a helpful slide just to see what is different about hospice. I said we're not hospice, we're not the medical system, but how does that actually work? And this pretty much answers the question. We do not provide any overlap services with hospice. So what hospice provides, they'll come to the home, they'll provide the services in Inhora. The other amazing thing, and I'm very passionate about, is people at the end of life should be worrying about the end of life, should be thinking of death and preparing for death. They shouldn't be worrying about money. And if they have enough money to have a good death, if they have enough of a support system for somebody to do the dishes so they can stay at home, to change them if they soil themselves. So we provide our services at Inhora free of charge, thanks to the sacrifices of donors and supporters and volunteers. And this model is being successfully implemented around the country. Like I said, hospitals want us because it is expensive for them to have somebody in a hospital bed that doesn't have a reason to be in the hospital bed, but can't be discharged because they don't have a home to be discharged to or an option to be discharged to. So those are wasted days, wasted dollars, which is why we all know when somebody's admitted into a hospital, the first thing that starts to happen is discharge planning. But that gets held up for people that don't have the resources in the home. So that's why we meet such a need that they want. Yes.
I was gonna say, maybe you could say what Omega Home is, because it's not. in
Oh,
there.
thank you,
It's not
thank you.
in
A mega home is, an Omega home is part of the network of these types of homes. So the long name of these types of home is social model hospice home. Then one of the nicknames because of this network is an Omega home. Thank you. That's not there on accident. It wasn't supposed to say Inhora, but that does clarify, because there are different models and different ways of doing this in different places. Yes, Father?
Miles, are there Omega homes all around the world, all around the US? Is yours the first? I don't know the background on that.
Yeah, it's a growing movement. The history started in the early days of hospice before it became medicalized and such. But then it kind of transitioned and maybe flourished in having these homes to care for those who are dying of AIDS, actually. And then from there, once that situation became treatable and helped, then they weren't needed for that purpose anymore. So people kind of re-envisioned and realized, okay, well, we're not doing a very good job of caring for any dying, let alone people who have AIDS. So we'll change our focus and open it up for anybody. So that's kind of the short story of it. Now, if other countries are doing it, I know that there are homes expanding beyond the US now. I believe there's one in Europe, one in Canada. So it is growing in the Western sphere. In rural parts of the world, let's say even third world countries, it's still the people who are doing it. So they don't really need a home like this. Maybe they still are, they still believe in big families, or they still believe in, you know, these natural things and normal human things that we stopped believing in our country. So they still care for their own dying, and there's still beautiful practices related to it throughout the world in their own different varieties and such. So
The closest Omega home to Albuquerque, I know yours is going to be here in a
Yeah.
couple of weeks or month. But is there one in Denver or Phoenix or Dallas or?
okay, yeah, well, there's one in Santa Fe, actually. So it's called Scott's House, and they do promote euthanasia there. But I am in regular communication with the director there because he's eager for us to open, because he's not able to meet the need. So he wants to refer people to us. So just to give an idea of the need in our community for a home like this. Yes.
When you say final days, and this could be Omega Home's definition, but
Right.
for Inhora, what is the final days?
People in their last weeks of life. And of course, we can't like nail that down. The average stay for Omega homes is around 7 to 10 days, which isn't enough, because that's just actually one of the sad things about the medical system is the system pushes people so far along in doing all the treatment, treat, even beyond hope, in putting all of this money into something that they know is probably not going to fix the problem. And the real problem is being able to face death, being able to have hard conversations. But unfortunately, that gets delayed. So, and not to mention on top of that, the culture, which has the fear of death. So people not being able to handle a hard conversation, or the difficulty in just starting that conversation. So people, in fact, that number, 7 to 10 days, maybe it's even into 2 weeks, is about how long people are in hospice on average. Although hospice could be a 6-month window, a lot of people are only getting at the very end. And that's actually another problem, because hospice is not meant to be so short of a window. So they actually don't get to experience real hospice. In fact, they get to experience trauma because they aren't prepared for it, and they think hospice is going to do everything and everything is going to be great. And then everything starts hitting the fan. They get traumatized. I was talking to a nurse practitioner middle of last year, and she was telling me about a traumatic experience in caring for one of her loved ones that divided the family. It was a home hospice, and they actually did have some money and support, and yet it wasn't what they dreamed, and it caused more problems than good. So it's not just people who are homeless who can benefit from this, but sometimes being in a home away from home is actually good for families, good for everybody. It's a middle ground, and it can allow those hard conversations and transitions. But yeah, so 7 to 10 days, it's not that much time. It's very quick, very rushed, and that's been an issue with a lot of these homes, is it's just so fast. We hardly have time to get them settled and comfortable before the person is already dead. So, yes,
And in some others, an Omega home in Tulsa or two
thank you,
in Tulsa,
yes.
is there one anywhere else?
Yes, there's 50 in the US. There's actually 3 in Tulsa now. I've been to 2 of them. One of them is Catholic based, which is really, really good. The other one isn't. It was founded on Christian and I believe even Catholic principles, but it's changed a bit. There are other ones in Oklahoma, two of them, and then a sister one in Texas. But it's run by a sister, a religious sister, and they have an amazing thing that I'm dreaming and praying, hopefully it can happen here, but they have a discipleship or like a missionary program where young people can come and do an internship in the home, at least over a summer, but sometimes to a year, 6 months. They go on pilgrimages, they have a common prayer life, they care for the dying, they have spiritual direction and this type of thing, all while they're volunteering and serving at these homes. So yeah, pretty amazing.
And I just wanted to add one more thing. We were watching a documentary about, I forget if he was a surgeon or who he was, but he was talking about how it is hard to have those hard conversations in the hospital and where you just treat, because for doctors or surgeons, if someone dies, it's because you failed.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was coming to terms with the fact that it's not about me. Like, it is about helping this person face death and being able to be honest with this person and their family. And because in our system right now, it's so much about liability and like not getting sued and not losing money, and the personhood of the people are getting lost because the medical professionals can be afraid and feel like they've failed and they can't do it's like a personal blow to them. So that's just part of that dynamic that he mentioned.
Yeah.
About not being able to have those hard conversations.
Yeah, that's really powerful.
And then there was like a middle lady too, right? Like maybe it would help doctors if they could work with people like this to kind of help them learn how to have those hard conversations, but there's like a buffer. There's someone who can say, hey, look, like that we actually can't treat you. How can we help you prepare for death, and kind of like coach the doctors. I don't know if it talks so much about that, but it's
the interdisciplinary team where somebody who's a hospice provider or a social worker, counselor teams up with the doctor, sits with them and the person, and helps to facilitate that hard conversation. Yeah. That documentary is Being Mortal. You can find it on PBS, and there's a book by the same name. The book came first. It's well worth watching. And it is from a very prominent doctor, I think at Hopkins.
A tool go on.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, it is. It's a good book and an interesting watch too. So, how can you be like Mary? So this is the call to action here. Remember that the pro-life movement is to natural death as well. Pray for the dead and the dying. I had an amazing conversation with a woman who has a strong devotion to the souls in purgatory. And we can't forget to offer masses and offer prayers for those who have died. It is so important. And for those at their hour of death, and to realize when we're saying something like the rosary, we are praying for those good deaths because it matters so much. That is the last chance for the evil one to snatch somebody from heaven, to bring them into despair, to bring them into a choice like euthanasia, or to isolate somebody. So really to remember them. The same person today was saying how inspiring it was for her to think of death, that thinking about it actually produces better life. And if we can remember that, I think things would be different. And actually, I met someone else, a couple Yeah, in the Inhora program, I met so many interesting people. So this was a couple who went on a mission trip after raising their children and being very comfortable. And then they just felt, we're just not satisfied. Something's missing. So they go on this mission trip, totally change their lives. They get rid of everything, get into an RV, and then do these mission trips and such throughout throughout the US, and they are still continuing this. I don't remember where I was going with that, except that I get to meet amazing people in this. Other things that we can do to imitate Mary is to volunteer at Inhora or to make donations. So not everybody can be hands-on, but to give is as important as it is to be hands-on. So St. John Chrysostom, again, I love the East. He said that those who have money are saved through generosity, and those who don't are saved through praying and thanking the generous. So, and then St. Basil the Great says that there are enough resources for everyone if we all just used enough. And I know that could get into political things, and that's not what I'm saying here by any means. I'm saying Christian charity, Christian choice, Christian goodwill of caring for each other. Any questions, thoughts? Yes.
So if you're gonna talk about this later in your presentation, you can ignore me. But, you guys don't provide medical care.
Correct.
So, but you're allowing hospice workers to come into the home to provide that care, like
Yes.
pain management, things like that?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so, I just didn't want to think though.
Thank you.
You guys find yourselves having, well, I mean, I know you're gonna receive your first person, so maybe you haven't. But what does it look like with medical directives of end of life? Like, are these people who are just, of course, they're not gonna do medical aid in dying? Or like, what if they did have like a medical aid in dying, like order,
Mhm.
lots of those things, I can't remember what that thing is called.
Right, yeah.
Like a medical executor kind of person. Are you-
Oh, a POA.
Yeah, like do
Yeah.
you find, like, are you gonna find yourselves in those sort of situations, or has that been a situation for mega homes?
Well, depending on the Omega home, some do support and become the center where those things become possible, where otherwise somebody who wasn't thinking of euthanasia now has a home, a place, a supportive system to make it happen. So definitely some of the homes are doing that, and unfortunately even solely exist for that purpose to support euthanasia, which is horrible to think about. When it comes to ours, we have an agreement in place that specifically says that euthanasia is not something that we will allow, and you're not allowed to promote it while any of your clients are here. If something like that was to happen, I'm not exactly sure how I could handle it, except by saying it can't happen, and we just have to explain it to the guest that if they want to choose this option, then they need to find a better home, a better place, actually, whatever it would be.
A
Different setting, yeah.
Not that, but
And related to that, we have a guest agreement as well, and in that it's clear too, so that they know that they're entering a Catholic and pro-life home that isn't going to support those things. So we have those two agreements in place. So
So is there a screening process for the guests then?
yes,
And so presumably that would be
yeah,
part of that screening process, asking
Exactly.
if they already have a medical, whatever the directive
sure.
is, and if so, what is that directive?
Yeah, those conversations are ideally going to happen before, and would really need to, because we're trusting hospice to respect our beliefs in the service that we're offering them. Like I said, hospice wants us, and they've proven that by lavishing their advertisements and things all in our home whenever they come. And then I just throw it away because it's a home, it's not a place to advertise. But anyways, yeah, if they start to break that agreement, then they're shooting themselves in the foot. If they start to bring us people and try to slip in, they're doing a disservice to their own patient, because they're putting them in a situation where they already know what the answer is and that we're not going to support it. So it's bad patient care, of course, and then it's going to be bad because we're not going to be working with them any longer either. If they're putting us in this tough situation and not having this patient-centered care, then yeah, it's going to be a cut of that relationship. So right now, hospices are eager to come into the home and get their foot in the door and try to make friends. So yeah, great question. Yes.
So what's your goal on staffing and, I mean, how many patients eventually could you take max and
Mhm.
what type of staff would you need to take care of that many patients?
Yeah. There's different ways to do it in different homes. So for us, as we're about to launch, we're going to discover. Right now, we're doing a volunteer-powered force, and that is feasible even in smaller communities. And from the feedback I've been getting from the 40 people we've trained to be caregivers in the home, it's looking very good that that's going to be possible. We have people willing to work overnight shifts and weekends and such too. So we need more. And as I mentioned, it's an interesting partnership with people who are opposed to our values, who still want to volunteer and are willing to come in respectfully. There's an agreement that every volunteer has to make too, which is to honor the pro-life values that we have and to not push their agendas and such like that too. So and then in the very training itself, some of it you can see on our YouTube page. We're starting to put it into videos. It's very up in front that we are Catholic, we are pro-life, and such. So 24/7 caregiving. We want at least 2 caregivers at all times. Part of it is we're going to have narcotics too, and we are able to do medication administration. So we want 2 people to be able to sign off on that. And then not to mention just for safety reasons. And we want a low ratio of the dying to the volunteers. You know, we don't want somebody to end up dying alone while they're in our house. Like that's what we're avoiding. So to have 3 people in the home at a time, which is how we're going to launch. We may move up to 4, but I don't think we will. So 3 people in the home at a time, 2 caregivers 24/7. It's a lot of care that these people are getting and a lot of attention, which goes back to Mary's example, the compassionate, abiding presence. And it was quoted a few times, but I'll make a special point here. The Samaritanus bonus. Please read it. It was put out through the Vatican. Very, very powerful document written, I think, in 2020 about care for the dying. And one of the biggest features is to abide. One of the biggest interventions and treatments we can do for somebody is to be there. It's not necessarily to do something or to fix something. And there's unlearning that we have to learn when we're in that situation as well. There's a lot of talks that I could give on each of these topics too. But yeah, that's a powerful document. I recommend it. And I do have citations at the end of this too, including art citations. We're excited. And there's much more than this.
Miles was, how many maximum in the home, how many dying maximum there?
The maximum before we would become a facility would be 5. Now, our home is designed with 3 bedrooms. They are large, and some hospices have already kind of nudged and said, hey, we could double up in a room. And there actually could be a person-centered reason to do that, which would be, I mean, one is we would be able to care for 1 other person, which is actually a pretty big difference. But another one is somebody who doesn't have family, or 2 people that don't have family might actually appreciate somebody in the same room. So we're going to start off with 3. And like I said, we'll probably just stick with 3. Now, our goal isn't to stop at 3. Our goal is to either have more homes like this or to build something from the ground up like they did in Tulsa, which is a 10-bed home, and to take it to the next level. So.
if you go beyond the 5, are there more complications? I mean, other than needing, of course, more caregivers, but is there any kind of state regulation when you go to a certain number? Or?
Exactly, yeah, it essentially becomes more of like a nursing home or
Mhm.
maybe even like a beehive home, something like that. Yeah, which we are 100% willing and ready to do should the Lord open that window over time as we get started and launch. Mhm.
So the only thing that would change if that happened would not be what you're doing, but just like the paperwork and the legal thing.
Right.
Like just labeling you as that kind of facility, but really the care and the style would be the exact same.
Yeah, that's right. Which is why we've toyed around with the idea of just doing smaller homes. And I think every community, every big city at least should have a home like this. So that is something we're looking at for New Mexico, is something, there's a lot of homes that aren't being used, or maybe with some remodeling could be repurposed. And I know there's a lot of good people that maybe even have an extra home or something, that could be donated, and that's what's happened in some of these states and situations. So that's not off the radar.
Yeah, it seems like one of the tricky things to manage, I've never seen, even my mother, when she died, is that oftentimes they're on methadone or a narcotic of some sort. And the fear by the family is that when hospice comes in, they're just overdosing these patients, giving them too much of these medications.
Yeah. Sometimes
So
that
how
happens.
do you manage that in your facility? Because it sounds like you're actually managing some of the medication.
That is a great question, and one that we haven't totally sorted out. One of the things that I've been praying for a year, and I've asked priest after priest, and even some religious, is we really need a spiritual director to help us in that area. And another, I'll just say kind of a weakness, I'll totally just transparent here. I'm not a hospice nurse. I'm an RN, but I never did hospice care nursing. So the Lord is providing a lot of people that have these skills, and I know that He will provide people at the right time. So I guess the long and the short is we need help in that area to define it and to guide us in it. But we are the ones, those in the homes are the ones who are going to be prescribed, who are going to be administering the medications. So, and they're going to be double checked when it comes to things like the narcotics too. So, yeah. Yes.
Have you ever heard of the National Catholic Bioethics Center? I might have mixed up some other words.
No, that's right.
I've heard of it.
They have the religious ethical directives
Mhm.
for end of life. You probably already read them. But they also have a consulting line. And so if while you're looking for somebody, because really it's there's definitely a lot of spiritual direction involved, but there's the Catholic ethics and morals involved as well. And they could help maybe in those, it would fill the gap in that time. They also have a year-long course you can take to get certified in Catholic ethics, which I have found valuable for myself. Especially if we move forward in the comprehensive healthcare clinic. But it might be something useful for you to then implement to all your volunteers as well, to give them a framework as well for those sort of situations.
Yes, yeah. I'm eager to get education material out there on things like that. And I guess even flip side of that is some people are afraid of giving treatments that are actually helpful in those situations because they think it's going to be a sin to give a medication. So it's an interesting dynamic on both sides of people, unfortunately, actually pushing it when they shouldn't, and then people being afraid of doing it when the person actually needs it. So
when we did the program, most of the people were most of them were nurses working in end of life. Because it is not a well-developed or explored practice in healthcare, as you've mentioned already. But particularly, we don't see it well in the Catholic realm.
Right. Oh, that's great. Thank you for bringing up that resource. Yeah. Yes.
What is your training program for volunteers? What does that consist of?
Yeah, right now it's a 4-hour training. We will have continuing education, but it covers anything from the we actually basically give the gospel during the course. Our first 15 minutes is a talk that I do about our philosophy, our background in it. So I get into things like theology of the body, reverence for the body, and the resurrection of the body, and also how the Lord trampled down death by his death, and just the scriptures and the teaching on that. So that's the introduction to the class. We get into things like how to support families in grief, how to provide a compassionate presence, how to caretake, what are some of the practical things, moisturizing mouth, how are we keeping them comfortable? So we get into that, documentation, and then we do this practice, a meditation on loss. I have it here if we have time, great, but that's kind of the basic outline. The last session we did was actually recorded, so I'm slowly with my daughter. We're publishing those on YouTube. So 2 of them are up right now, the first 2 talks. So
Yeah, give us those links or whatever, just so we learn better.
okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yes.
Just a quick note, I don't know how many of you guys know Bill and Carol Lesperance. She's a nurse, and they're probably older than Mark and I. He's a lawyer. They ended up I think they sold their house, putting everything in storage, and went and lived in DC for, I think, maybe 2-ish years to take care of an aunt. And maybe Bill was the only one available, but what was interesting is talking to her afterwards, and I wish she was here tonight. She was a nurse, but she said, Carol, this is how it should be done.
Yes.
And I thought of that, and I don't know if they're writing an article about it. I think they might be, but I'll get in touch with them.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And that's, again, one of the things is when somebody's institutionalized in a nursing home, not getting visited, not getting cared for, and in this isolated setting, we are missing out on the opportunity to meet Jesus, to touch Jesus, to be compassionate. So, one of the temptations of the devil, and especially in despair, is my life isn't valuable, like that guy with ALS. I'm not contributing anymore. I can't even imagine a world where people are caring for me. I can only imagine a world where I'm caring for them. We are inundated with the culture of utilitarianism, and if something isn't helpful, then it's not valuable. So get rid of it. And especially men, it can be so harmful that once we feel that we're not doing anything for society, then we feel like we don't belong and we don't want people to care for us. So then that leads to ending our life, despair, and all of these evils. So what those people need is, of course, education, and that's part of the Inhora mission, is we want to have a new conversation and help with the paradigm shift. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's actually this, it's in the air right now about people talking about death and dying. There's a lot of death doulas who are being interviewed. There's a lot more talks. There's a ton of books out there now about death and dying that weren't there. So we're on the cutting edge of the conversation, and we want to bring that pro-life aspect in the sense that it is a blessing to us to be able to care for you. Let us care for you. Don't end your life. Let us have the gift and the blessing to meet Jesus with you and to care for you. It makes us more human when we care for the dying. It makes us, if we don't think about death, if we aren't experiencing it and seeing it, then we're ignoring something inevitable that is going to happen to us. And I think one of the most important events of our life, dying, so to be with it, to care with it, or to care for those experiencing it is a great gift that we're missing out
It
on.
came to my mind, like, what is helpful? I think that word doesn't mean what you think it means. Maybe our idea of what is helpful in the utilitarian view, like we don't even know what's helpful. And so
Like useful or
right, yeah, what is useful, and like you're saying, it is useful for us to see someone die and to care for someone who is dying, because in that very state of vulnerability, and maybe even helplessness, like they are helping us to prepare for our death too, and
Yeah.
and other things,
Yeah, so with utilitarianism, exactly, you're kind of using that same mentality of usefulness, and you're saying it is useful that you're here. You are important to society. Without you, we're missing out. We're missing out on a divine encounter. We're missing out on time with the Lord, like Mother Teresa was saying. You are a blessing. Your life matters. So, yeah. Mhm.
Sorry, I have a lot of questions.
Great.
Is there an age, like, do you have to be an adult? Can you be a minor?
Yeah, no age limits.
No age limits.
No, and we background check everybody who comes to volunteer too.
So as the patient though, it could be like,
Right.
okay, and then so like, I've been with my grandparents as they've passed and others, there's even when she was in the nursing home, like we all like stayed at the nursing home, slept on the couch.
Yes,
In her last days, is that something that Inhora House will be
yes.
able to provide
Yeah.
as well?
That's another reason that I'm so like set on the individual rooms. In every room, there's a sleeper sofa, and we have no restriction of visiting hours. So people can come any time of day, any time of night, weekend, holiday, 365, to be with their loved one. Absolutely, yeah, that was very important to us. And in a lot of homes, every death is different. So you'll have some that is solemn, quiet, crying. Then you'll have some where some mariachi band comes in and it's a celebration and it's joyous and that. So we are open to all of those experiences too. Yeah, yes.
You envision people coming in and you ask them about last rites when they come in? I know you're right next to Immaculate Conception.
Right.
But
Well, that's one of those. I don't know why the Lord has waited so long to bring us that right person, to be that connection, that bridge. There are many priests who support us and many priests who have wanted to, or deacons, but they are just so overwhelmed with what they're doing. They haven't been able to step in. But yes, we need that connection so that we do have the sacraments. Now, hospices provide a hospice chaplain, which is good and has a role, but we all know what a hospice chaplain means now, or a medical chaplain. It can mean that chaplain is an atheist. It could mean that it's a anything, right? So we are in extreme need for that pastoral support for those. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it reminds me of a story I told to somebody today, which is a story from Mother Teresa, a huge inspiration for us, which is people on their deathbed would say, I want to be baptized, I want to be a Christian, I want to be Catholic. So a priest would be called in and the priest would rightly say, okay, why do you want this? And they would say, I don't know really what it means to be Catholic. I don't really know like what it entails, what the beliefs are, but I see God in these women caring for me and I want that. So and then a number of people have been baptized in those situations. So yeah, I'm eager, not as eager as the Lord. Like I said, I don't know what's taking you so long. But yeah, that is very, very important. And you're right, Immaculate is so close. In fact, we're renting the property from Immaculate Conception also. So I'm sure something is being cooked up.
I'm curious in general, I know your devotion to Mary schooled a lot of this, but what's been your experience, or why the focus on caring for the dying?
Yeah, it's my wife laughs because I have my real conversations with her, and I'll have them with you too. I've done, caring for people in the hospital in their last days, and I've cared for bodies afterwards and such. And I thought of one time of becoming a hospice nurse, and then did other things. It wasn't something I was totally passionate about. It's not like since I was a kid I've thought of caring for people who are dying. I'm not somebody who, has a memento mori tattoo or anything, or has that on my computer. So I don't really know how or why. I have a lot of whys, but I'm learning to ask those whys more like Mary did. Like, how is this going to happen? And like Zachariah's response, like how like this is impossible, not gonna happen. I'm learning to ask it in more faith, like me married, 6 kiddos, and a fairly stable job at the VA that I left to start this and such. So it happened 2 years ago. I just woke up in the night and just had the idea before I knew what an Omega home was, wrote it all down, and it just sat there. I don't know, it just wasn't the right time. But then about a year later, it was stirred back up. I got into a job. The Lord put me into a job that was like opposite to my personality and my gifts. In a dungeon, in the VA basement, no windows, no light.
Processing
And-
paperwork all day long.
Yeah, at a computer, just totally different than me. And that was the greatest blessing because I realized, like Adam, who was looking at all these animals, oh, that's not a woman, that's not a woman, that's not a woman. It was kind of like that with me and my occupation, like, okay, that wouldn't really fit, that wouldn't really fit. And this would, and then those ideas came back. And then I realized through conversations with some peers that there were, that this thing existed already, and it was through the Omega Home Network. So I didn't have to reinvent the wheel, got connected, went on a pilgrimage, visited 2 of those places in the process in Tulsa while I was doing the 3 Hearts pilgrimage out there. And it all just grown since September of 2023. So just a little bit over a year of actual deciding that I'm going to do this and then going for it. Yeah.
We're led to those opportunities.
Yes.
If we don't want to choose them.
It's always exciting at night, getting ready for bed, relaxing. Hey, so what would you think if?
Yeah, she is. Without my wife, nothing of this would be possible. She has a lot more faith than I do in these things too. So.
It's fun to follow you on these adventures. I'm always excited to see what the Lord will pop in his head next.
Yeah.
It's kind of like his nursing career too. He came home one day, I'm gonna be a nurse and not sell furniture anymore. It's kind of like that with this too. You want to make this home for the dying. Okay, well, not you make it, but
Yeah.
follow Mary into, yeah, follow the Lord into.
Miles, you've come to most of our meetings, haven't you, so far? Can't-
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So you need to come to our meetings.
I know, it's true. Absolutely.
You can get updates and you can pester us and we can help you.
Yeah, I'd be glad.
And how's your status of the, I know you were applying for the 50, whatever you call it. Yeah.
Yes.
Is that coming along or?
It is coming along. You won't maybe have heard or known Thomas Mackin, lawyer. So he's working with me and is a big supporter and was actually just in the home last week. His son is refurbishing one of our religious pieces of furniture, which I just can't wait for. And you'll have to see it to know why it's so exciting. But anyway, so yeah, he's helping me with the paperwork. So things slow down during the holidays. I was hoping we would get it in before then, but yeah, it is in the works. So little by little, again, not as fast, Lord, but everything is still moving along. And donations, even though we aren't a 501c3, they still are tax exempt because the IRS has a rule that as long as we get the 501c3 within like 26 months, which we're definitely on track to do, then any donations given within that period can still be given a receipt of a tax exempt donation. So.
And it really is inspiring how the Lord has been providing. We were,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, always more is welcome, so if you know that. It's welcome, we're not the same, we're set. But in a way, we are set with God. You know, we are like, dear God, 500,000 would be, that would be great. You know, 500,000. And, you know, it hasn't quite played out that way, but, you know, a spontaneous gift of $2,000 or maybe like a $20 a month here, or like a connection from the movie industry just happens to donate us the right amount of paint and all the right colors, you know, or someone just donated flooring, and it's not perfect. It's not like all of it's immaculate, but it's good and it's useful. And that's like, thousands of dollars worth of material, so. It's like the way the Lord chooses to provide is not the way, his ways are not our ways. It's like 500,000, okay, here's some flooring. So that is very encouraging, and just a shout out to the Lord. You know, making good on his word, even though we don't always know why he's doing it, but.
Yeah,
It's
somebody,
better for us that way, maybe.
yeah, another answer that I gave one time, actually in an interview, I don't know if you know a Voice of Reason, I recommended, it's a local apologetics speaker, Alex Jurado. So he goes to our parish, but he interviewed me about this. And he asked me that question. I said, well, it's because I'm just enough wild or just enough crazy to like try something like this. That's why me. So, yeah, and I could give you more of the background of my early days, and you'd probably be surprised. But then maybe not surprised, because now it's coming, these things are coming out in healthier and better ways. Yes, Father.
Miles, this is just absolutely wonderful because, you know, for over 40 years, I've been escorting souls to eternity and have seen so many that are abandoned, you know, in hospitals or nursing homes. I cannot thank you and thank God enough for this happening now, and we'll certainly pray for it to grow and to support this. And I think as the clergy hear more about this, you will find there will be support. And even the priest right there at Immaculate Conception, there are a number of them.
Yes.
Hopefully they'll get to visit and tour your facility, not facility, home.
Right.
That's great. It's just incredibly blessed, because it makes the world a difference to accompany a soul at those moments than not to. You know, when I go to a place where there's a family, friends, loved ones that are there for them and supporting them, what a difference, you know, than when you go to a place where, you know, there's no one, absolutely no one. And there's a lot of that, sadly, in our culture. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that encouragement and the prayers. I'm counting on them.
Yes.
We need to do something in the community,
Mhm.
our group, maybe Board can talk even about helping you officially out, but maybe we can hold that till the next meeting and get kind of late, but.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it. This is wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Admire what you're doing.
Yes.
And your wife, you both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.